Hi, I'm Kendall with the Rawls Group. The old African proverb, "it takes a village," illustrates the essential nature of a team approach to succession planning. Succession planning is a complex endeavor. As such, it requires leveraging the expertise of a diversity of backgrounds. Collaboration and different expert opinions provides a 360-degree approach, ensuring the possible, probable, and potential issues impacting your long-term vision are addressed. To provide insight into common questions received from business owners, we are leveraging the village of our valued strategic relationships. As you listen to this episode, you'll be able to immediately apply the key takeaways and you'll come back for more. Now we're going to focus on how will the new normal of COVID-19 affect our culture?
Hi, I'm Emily Pasadento, Principal with MCM's HR Solutions Group. And today I'm going to answer the question, how will the new normal affect our culture? And let's be honest, there's been some pretty big impacts. First and foremost, how do we attract candidates? How do we even recruit in times like this? For most of us, it's going to be through a screen. And so we would encourage, consider having other people also be part of that process so that it does feel a little bit more like your firm. So they have an opportunity to meet a few more people who they'll be working with, even if it is through a screen temporarily. And then about onboarding, making sure people feel connected, not just with the necessary paperwork on the front end or getting their computers up to speed. Those are all important, but also making sure that they understand who they'll be working with, how their work will impact others, and making sure they feel connected to their team members, even if they are in different locations and even if they are working remote right now. Another area is engagement. We were really good at engagement back when we had our softball teams and our bowling teams and just able to get together and socialize. What do we do now? We would encourage to make sure that you use these opportunities and do things a little differently. Our firm, for instance, is doing videos. We've got competitions, show us your talent, show us your pets, just ways in which we can kind of, since we're home, what can we do that's a little different that we couldn't maybe ask before? So figuring out ways in which we can get to know a little bit more about each person and step away from some of the heaviness of what's going on in the world. Another area too is remote work, making sure that our team has all the resources they need. Most of us, if we're asked, do you think that your company can go remote in February? Even in February, most of us would have said no. It's just not, we're not ready for that. But yet, a month later, most of us were in fact working remote. So making sure we have the resources available and the support available so that business can continue without missing a beat. And less client interaction. It is different. It's different for all of us. We all miss it. So how can we do things a little differently? It might be a virtual coffee. It might be sending a client lunch instead of going there to have it with them. Doing things a little differently, taking phone calls at a different time of day to accommodate everyone else. So making sure that we're a little bit more creative, thinking a little bit more outside the box, figuring out ways to connect, because that hasn't changed. That's still a need for most of us. And so making sure we can get creative and find safe ways to connect and stay plugged in. And finally, wellness. Everyone is going through this and it's kind of on a different page. And so making sure that they feel heard, making sure that they feel like they're part of the team, and making sure that there's still individualization going on in your firm. And I know that's hard. I know that's hard when people are working remote and when we're doing everything through a screen or on the phone or through email. But this is the time where figuring out a way to make it work is really giving a really big important message to your team members that they're valuable and they're important and that you see them, even if it is through a screen. So we would encourage you to get creative right now. Find ways to let people be connected, because being connected creates that synergy that we're looking for, and in turn will create that culture of togetherness that even through times where it feels very much like a storm, we have stayed focused on business needs as well as individual needs, and we've gotten closer, and we've grown because of it. Those are just a few of our ideas of what we would recommend for ways in which you can grow and your culture will be impacted for the better. Thank you.
Let me say at the onset that I remain very encouraged and pleasantly surprised by how employers and employees have interacted, continued to be productive during the COVID crisis. And that's really on all fronts that I deal with in both the production, manufacturing, and the service industry. Going forward, I'm not sure that we're going to see any short-term dramatic changes associated with that, but I think, as I'll explain, we may see some long-term changes. And I sort of separate it into two categories: the manufacturing side and the service side of what we do and how we deal with employers and employees on a day-to-day basis. I think the more permanent new normal will impact the service side more than the production and manufacturing side. On the manufacturing side, as I've said before, things are amazingly smooth, and we've had very few COVID-related dramatic effects, both the application of the law and the employee-employer interrelationships as they go forward. Since the time the furloughs ended here in Georgia several weeks ago, employers and employees have been working pretty much at full production in the manufacturing industry. We've had very few COVID-related issues, surprisingly. I think at the beginning we would have predicted many more serious problems. It seems as if everybody's working pretty well together on that side. And the reason I don't see any long-term impact there is because it's pretty much impossible to produce widgets from home. At least we haven't developed the technology to do that quite yet. And so I don't see the same impact down the road that I see in the service industry. Now, with that said, there's obviously some legal issues that we're dealing with related to the furloughs and people in need of leave and the various types of leave. And, we're starting to see some suspected abuse of leave privileges, and those issues will continue, but they have not been of any significant magnitude yet. Most of our employees who are making widgets are working alongside each other in what seems to be a pretty safe environment, and we have had, thankfully, very few issues on that front. The service industry, I think, is more of a practical long-term impact as opposed to a legal long-term impact. And I think, in talking to employers and employees, that companies in the service industry have probably been very pleasantly surprised at how seamless the whole work from home transition has been. There was always the fear that employees wouldn't work like they're supposed to, or it'd be hard to keep track of their productivity. Maybe it's because we've all sort of pulled together for COVID. There have not been those, at least we haven't seen significant problems in that area. It doesn't mean they won't occur in the future. However, I do think that many employers, especially in this time, who are looking to reduce overhead, and I mean physical overhead, building space, staff, support staff, and so forth, will look at this whole picture differently once COVID is over, in the sense that, especially when it comes to office space and so forth, I think they'll be much more open-minded when it comes to employees working from home. Now, that carries with it certain legal issues I mentioned earlier about how do you keep track of time, how do you make sure people are being productive, how do you evaluate people, how do you assess their behavior when they're not right next to you, how do you communicate effectively via email and Zoom and Blue Jeans and all of those mechanisms, and will that continue? And from a legal standpoint, that mainly means, how do we keep track of time, pay people appropriately, avoid people using email to violate policy, which happens on occasion. So I think we will see that as a long-term fallout of COVID, and it may be a very good development, because I think employers were fearful of that in the past. I think they're probably less fearful now. So that's how I see it at this point. It may change.
What is the new normal? For me, The new normal represents constant change. Without change, there is no progress, and we certainly have an opportunity for a lot of progress during these uncertain times. As an attorney, the new normal has affected our culture in several ways. First, we've had to rely on technology more than ever, whether it be attending court hearings, conducting depositions, or participating in mediations via video conference. Our reliance on technology has completely changed the way we practice law. Second, based on this heavy reliance on technology, I believe that the new normal has shown that remote working is the way of the future. Law firms will require less space because more attorneys will take advantage of the advances in technology to work from home and be just as productive as if they were working in the office. This will hopefully lead to attorneys finding more work-life balance, which will likely lead to attorneys living happier lives.
The answer is anywhere from slightly, or not at all, to very profoundly. So let's talk a little bit about those, and first we'll go to the slight. There's a good possibility that if you're already happy with your guiding principles, which would include your mission, your vision, your purpose, your values, and to a certain extent your beliefs, there's not going to be a need for a profound impact on that because that message is already out there. It will need to be reinforced, and when we start talking about how do you reinforce the message, that's where we begin to get into some of the profound implications that the new normal will have on your culture. Your people are going to have to learn new skills. They're going to have to learn how to communicate effectively and build relationships effectively through the use of a camera. They're going to have to use Zoom or FaceTime or some other technological advance that is out there and available for people to use. But they need to feel comfortable being in front of the camera. They almost need to be Reagan-esque, taking all the politics out of it. They need to be Reagan-esque in the way that they're able to communicate effectively to people without being in front of large masses of them at any one point in time. It's going to be more difficult to model the behavior that you want people to follow because modeling by walking around is out, at least in the near term, because we want isolation and we want social distancing. So modeling the behavior that you want is going to have to be done through video blogs, through the communications processes that we talked about a little earlier, and you're going to have stronger written examples of what it is that you really want people to follow. And those written examples are going to have to be focused and they're going to have to be relevant. In effect, you're going to have to internally market your culture stronger than you have ever done before. One of the principles of marketing is that it's all based on repetition, intensity, and duration. In the new normal, internal marketing is going to be based on relevance, repetition, intensity, and duration. Now, will the old normal ever come back? That's kind of the corollary to this question. And there's a possibility that it will, because there's a human adage that says the more things change, the more they stay the same. One of the reasons that that takes place is because we try to make the new look and work like the old. So to say it's never going to come back is probably a pretty dangerous thing to say. And if there are a couple of things I've learned in life, one of them is that two of the most dangerous words in the English language are never and always. So part of what you really want to be able to do is be flexible, understand that things are going to continue to change, and that at some point, the more they change, the more they look like, and the more they will become the old normal.
Thank you to our strategic partners, The Village, for participating and sharing your perspective. Do you have a burning question you want to discuss with an expert? Feel free to submit it via the Ask an Expert link featured on the page. Continue to listen to this series now or come back later for more. Each question featured may want you to learn something new.